What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. This video is going to be my preview and prediction of the Utah versus Florida game coming up here in week 1. My goal is to make 3 of these prediction style videos every week and then do like a recap video after each weekend, but we'll see how that actually plays out. I don't want to make any promises. I do still have a lot of other stuff going on at the same time, so it's hard to get all that content out on time. But let's go ahead and get into this game's preview. Just a quick intro into this game, and these two teams are in very different situations at this point. Utah returns head coach Kyle Whittingham in a very, very physical brand of football that really knows what it wants to be and what it usually is, while Florida is in year 1 under Billy Napier with a lot of unknowns surrounding their identity and just what the team's going to look like this season. However, Florida had a pretty unique year last year, and I think that is really adversely affecting the national perception of their program. I mean, they started off the season very, very hot last year. I mean, they very nearly beat Alabama. They only lost that game by 2 at home. It wasn't until later on into the year where things really just started to completely fall apart under Dan Mullen. He completely lost his team. The team clearly quit on him in a pretty major way, a way that I don't think I've ever really seen happen so rapidly at such a major program that was having a pretty good season up to that point. But the point of that is that for Florida to be as good as they were really early on in the year and to be able to play Bama to within 2 points, they have to be very talented. They clearly have supreme talent on that roster. The issues were really around the coaching and also the quarterback position, where Anthony Richardson will take center stage this year. He's clearly supremely talented as well, but he just hasn't been able to put it all together at this point. I think this year he's going to make a lot of large strides to improve on his issues from last season. I mean, he really didn't have any experience going into last season, at least not enough to really justify starting him halfway through the year like they did. So this year, I think he's got much more experience under his belt. He'll have an entire offseason as the starter to really get things going. He'll be working with the new staff. I think he's going to make a lot of leaps and bounds. Now, that doesn't mean he'll be Bryce Young or anything, but I think he will be better than last season. Utah, on the other hand, has Cam Rising at quarterback, and he's another guy who came on last season in early to middle of the year for them, and he looks to be better this year as well. They also have great running backs. They always have great running backs at Utah, a very physical offensive and defensive line as well. That is just their style of play. They run the ball first. Cam Rising can run the ball pretty well, and they play physical up front. Utah's questions, however, start to arise particularly in their secondary on the defensive side of the ball. And then another big question for Florida in this game is going to be, will they be able to adequately exploit the secondary with their passing offense? Because Florida's passing offense is not the kind of offense that is just going to be able to absolutely torch them like, say, Ohio State was able to do. The other really, really big question here and absolutely massive factor is the swamp. Now, I know Utah fans really don't want to hear this, but the swamp is unlike anything Utah has seen in recent years, and it makes a huge difference in this game, particularly in week 1. You're coming out of the COVID years now where a lot of even your juniors and seniors on the roster haven't necessarily played in incredibly hostile environments, particularly in the Pac-12. And going into the swamp is going to be unlike anything Utah has really ever done before. I commend them for scheduling this game on the road like that and going in there and playing them. So while Utah is likely the better team here, that home field advantage could really, really swing things. I mean, it absolutely affected Alabama when they went in there early in the season last year. I think it will definitely affect Utah this year. Now, to go ahead and get into the stats for this game, and these are all last season stats, so it's all we have to go on at this point. I know they aren't the most accurate thing for predicting this year, but there's still a lot of important information to be gleaned from them regardless, and again, it's really all that we have. So looking at the team offensive stats here, you see that Utah was 14th in points per game at 36.1. That's a very respectable number there. And then you see the passing yards, though. 84th in passing yards at 214, only 24 passing touchdowns to 8 interceptions, and 57th in passing efficiency. It's just not what they did. First, they weren't very good at it. You can tell even by the efficiency. So, for example, Georgia is a team that doesn't have great on passing yards per game. Their touchdown numbers are pretty high. But that's because they just don't do it very often, not because they're not good at it when they do it. Their efficiency was 4th, I believe, At the very least, it was top 5 in the country in passing efficiency. Utah, not exactly the case here. Their efficiency is 57th, so even with accounting for less attempts and things like that, they're still not a very efficient passing offense, and that's fine. That's just not really what the team is built around. That's not what they do well, and that's not what they try to do well. They focus very much on the running game. But one thing that you do see here is that sacks allowed ranking 4th in the nation in sacks allowed and 12th in the nation in tackles for loss allowed. Very good offensive line play out of Utah. There always is very good offensive line play there. Very, very good offensive line play here. It'll be interesting to see how that matches up against an SEC defensive front. Florida's defensive front isn't particularly dominant by any means, but they do have some dudes on there, Javon Dexter, Brenton Cox, things like that. They have some very good players. Now, on the Florida side of things, they averaged 30.7 points per game. That was 49th in the country, so not good. Not even, about a touchdown worse than what Utah did, but not awful either. Passing was a little bit better than Utah at 254 a game, but I feel like they did put much more of an emphasis on passing. 27 passing touchdowns, but here's the huge number, 18 passing interceptions. That's really bad. That's really, really bad. And that is really what hurt Florida a lot. Their passing efficiency ranking is 51st, so very, very similar passing offense to Utah as far as their efficacy and their efficiency and how good and effective they are at passing the ball, but the interception number is absurd, and that really, really holds Florida back, and it's something that if they run into here again in this game, I think they're going to throw their shot at winning this game out the window. If they're throwing 2, 3, 4 interceptions in this game, they're going to have some real problems. Sacks allowed ranking, Florida was actually pretty good at 7th. To do that in the SEC is always pretty tough. But the tackles for a loss at 48th, their offensive line was not nearly as good at run blocking as they were at pass blocking, which is kind of unfortunate because they were a better rushing team than they were a passing team. I mean, with Anthony Richardson at quarterback, I think that's going to be true again. Don't get me wrong, he has a lot of arm talent, but he's just not a drop-back passer. That's really not what he is. And I think Billy Napier is really going to utilize his legs even more so than Dan Mullen did when he was there. And I think if they want to really maximize this offense, that's what they're going to have to do. Their receiving core is not bad by any means, but it's not stellar either. So focusing on running the football, getting the ball, short passes to the hands of your playmakers, things like that, I think that's going to be what Florida's offense is going to be best at. I think that's what they should focus on. So the offensive line, you'd like to see that tackles for a loss allowed ranking improve, but it is what it is at this point. I don't know if that's going to see much improvement. I think the offensive line will be about the same as it was last year. Not bad, but not anything amazing for them. Rushing yards per game, Florida was 23rd at about 209 with 26 rushing touchdowns. Only 3 fumbles lost, so not bad there. Whereas Utah was 13th in the country with 217 yards per game, 37 rushing touchdowns, which is absurd, and 7 fumbles lost, which is a little higher than you'd want to see, but with the low interceptions and just the sheer amount of carries that Utah had, it's not awful. Here is going to be a huge matchup in this game. It's just the rushing game. And we'll get to it when we talk about the defensive stats as well. But both of these teams are going to want to and need to run the ball, so whoever can establish that better is going to be in a much better scenario going forward in this game, which carries me into the third down percentage, which I think is also absolutely vital in this game. I don't think either of these offenses are going to be good enough to get into third and longs consistently and feel comfortable. And last year, if you look, Florida was 54th in third down conversion percentage at about 41%. Utah was 8th at about 48%. So Utah was much better than them last year, and I think that's because Utah was a more efficient running offense than them last year. Utah runs very well on first and second down. It sets up a lot of third and manageables. And if Utah can do that and stay in sync in this game, I think that bodes very well for them. If they, put Cam Rising in a lot of third and nines, they're going to run into some issues there. But if they can keep things on schedule, stay in sync, get the run game going, and stay focused on that, I think they're going to be just fine. And with a third down percentage there, that extends drives. It keeps Florida off the field. It tires their defense out, and it plays right into what Utah wants to do. They want long drives. They want to churn through a game, and they want to just physically wear on an opponent. Now, it'll be interesting to see how that works again against an SEC team because the SEC just naturally has better athletes across the board. They're a little bit more talented, particularly on the lines of scrimmage usually. Utah is kind of the exception to the rule in the Pac-12 in that. So it'll be very interesting to see how that matches up. I think they got not necessarily lucky because Florida's not an easy matchup, but Florida is not the SEC defensive front or even offensive front that you would see against like a Georgia, for example. But they're still a very good SEC front. Red zone percentage, neither one of these teams were particularly good. Utah especially struggled in red zone scoring percentage at about 84% of the time. That was 73rd. Florida at about 86% of the time. That was 45th. That could be another huge thing in this game. If one team is settling for a lot of field goals, whereas another is converting a lot of touchdowns, that could make for a huge swing in this game. I don't, foresee a clear path for either one to be better than the other. Both of them were pretty comparable at it last year. Both of them run pretty similar offenses, to be honest. Utah a little more run-heavy than Florida. But really, it's not a clear advantage there either way. The lines of scrimmage is what's going to determine that. And the lines of scrimmage is what's going to determine most everything in this game. Both teams on time of possession are about the same, so I don't think that is going to be big based off that stat. But in this game, if Utah, for example, with that third down conversion rate, can extend a lot of drives and win time of possession, it definitely helps their case. Same with Florida. Both teams are trying to do the same thing here, which is why things like the line of scrimmage is going to be absolutely vital. I mean, that is going to determine the course of this game in a major way. It always does, but even more so in this one than in other games. So your big takeaways from the offensive side, Florida's turnovers are a problem. They cannot be that turnover prone. They're not good enough to be that turnover prone and expect to win games against teams like Utah. So if they have turnover issues in this game, it's really, really going to dampen any hope they have of getting a win here. Rushing offense for Florida was pretty good. I think adding Anthony Richardson to that, even more so than he was last year, is only going to improve that. And so I think that'll be a very interesting thing to see, particularly on how it matches up against Utah's rushing defense. Florida also needs to note their passing efficiency, just not great. Now, I know Utah's isn't either, but I think it's going to be more crucial for Florida because I'm less confident in their ability to just dominate by establishing the run than I am in Utah's ability to do that just based off of what the offense is. And a lot of the questions around Florida, we just don't know. There's a lot of unknowns with Billy Napier taking over and all. I think they're going to be fine long term, but week one, there's so much unknown. It's going to be really important, I think, for Florida to be efficient through the air without having a bunch of turnovers. On the Utah side of things, their rushing attack has to carry the day. They can't put this game all on Cam Rising's arm. They're just not built to do that. Their offense is entirely built around running the football. That's what they're going to have to do. They have to establish the rushing attack here again. And they're going to lean on the lines of scrimmage and the offensive line to do that. It'll be interesting to see how effective they'll be with it because, on the other hand, their passing offense is kind of a struggle. It's comparable to Florida's, really, but honestly, Florida is a little bit more explosive with theirs than Utah is in their passing game. And it's not to say that Utah can't throw, but Utah needs to be a team that is dictating when they throw. Utah cannot be in third and longs and having to throw the ball. If it's a situation where Utah wants to throw, and again, they're dictating when they're throwing, that favors them much more than being put in a situation where they absolutely have to throw the ball. And then the last takeaway from this one, third down percentage and red zone percentages. Red zone percentages could really swing this game, but I don't see a clear edge either way going into it. Third down percentage, Utah had a clear edge from last year. If that carries over again into this year, which honestly it should. Now, Florida could very well improve their third down percentage, but I think Utah's will be about the same as it was last year. I think that's another swing point in this game. Whoever can get more third and manageables, get more rushing attempts on third downs, and convert more of them, win the time of possession, churn through the ball game, establish that running game. I think that's going to be the huge things to watch on the offensive side. So let's move on to the defensive stats now. And neither one of these teams were particularly elite defensively. Utah was better than Florida, but Florida had a really historically bad defense in some ways. So looking at this, Utah allowed about 22.5 points per game. That was 35th in the country. Not great, not bad, just pretty middling. Florida averaging around 26.5 points. Again, that was 65th. Much worse, but still not atrocious, really. I mean, 65th is not where you want to be, but it's not like completely going to kill you here. Passing yards per game. This is where it gets really interesting. So Florida was 25th, averaging around 204 passing yards per game. Not great, but not awful. And then if you look at their passing efficiency defense, they were 34th. So they didn't face a lot of elite passing offenses, but even still, 34th in passing efficiency defense for Florida is not bad. They only got 9 interceptions, which was around 80th. So again, not great there. The passing defense was solid, though. And a lot of that, too, you can see they did decent on sacks as well. I mean, most of their passing defensive rankings are all in that same 25 to 35 kind of range. They were a good but not great passing defense. On the Utah side of things, they were pretty bad on passing defense, particularly when faced with elite talent at the skill positions like the Ohio State game. Now, I know Utah had a lot of injuries in the secondary. They were playing a converted running back at corner, and they were going up against a prolific Ohio State passing offense. Florida's not going to present that kind of thing, and Utah's secondary should be much improved from that particular game. But even over the course of the entire season, Utah's secondary was a concern, and it will be here again as well. If Anthony Richardson can sort of victimize them, you can run into some real serious issues there for Utah. They were 60th in passing yards per game allowed, 60th in interceptions, 53rd in passing efficiency defense. So not very good. Again, not atrocious, but for a team of their caliber, being in the 50s and 60s in rankings is not great. Now, on the flip side of that, they did get 42 sacks last year, which was good for 19th. So that's pretty good. It's not amazing, but it is pretty good. And it's really their saving grace, and I think it even more so highlights the secondary. If they're getting 42 sacks per game and they're still 60th in passing yards a game allowed, 53rd in passing efficiency defense, the secondary is a problem. And it absolutely is just by watching the games. And so Florida doesn't have an elite receiving core, but they do have some elite athletes in the receiving core. And so I know their passing offense isn't necessarily designed to take advantage of something like this, but if it's there and Florida can take advantage of it, could turn into a long night for Utah, specifically on that. Now, I don't think Florida is well equipped to do that, but the possibility is there. Moving into the rushing defense here, you see Utah 21st in tackles for loss, whereas Florida was 60th. This is where you really start to see Florida fall off the rails here. Utah 19th in rushing yards per game allowed at about 119. Florida allowed 164. That was 85th. Fumbles recovered, not too critical here, but again, you see Florida not forcing very many turnovers. Third down defense, Florida was actually pretty decent here, 36%, or about 36% of the time, which puts them 36th in the country. Utah, similar as well, about 37% of the time, but about 49th in the country. So Florida, a little bit better there. Red zone defense, though, Florida was not very good, putting them at 72nd in the country, whereas Utah was 39th in the country in red zone defense. So, we mentioned that there wasn't a clear edge on that on the offensive side. On the defensive side, Utah does seem to have an edge there. But again, how much of that carries over to the next year is really hard to say. So I don't think there's anything too critical in the third down defense percentages or red zone defense percentages. But in the rushing yards per game, that is a huge one. Florida got ran all over by a few teams last year. And a lot of that you can chalk up to Todd Grantham as the DC, who got let go, and then Lance Mullen got let go, and so it was a whole thing. But it is pretty inexcusable for Florida to be that bad in rushing defense. Now, I think they'll improve, but the question is more so how much can they improve? How much of that was a coaching issue versus how much of that was a personnel issue? What can they fix? How much of that is just a culture issue or a physicality issue with some of your players? And again, how can you fix that and how quickly can you fix that? I think Napier is going to very, very heavily focus on that for this defense, particularly against Utah, because if Florida's rushing defense performs like they did last year, Utah is going to run through them in this game because they're a dominant rushing offense, and if you can't at least hold up at the point of attack and create some negative runs and just stop them from getting 5 yards a carry, you're going to have a long night. So a huge, huge matchup there, again, determined specifically on the lines of scrimmage. That's where a lot of this game is going to swing on all sides of the football. It just is what it is in that. That is the huge factor in this game. Another thing I want to point out again, turnover margin. Utah was not great. They had a +1 turnover margin, 69th in the country. Florida was 120th in turnover margin at -9. You can't win with that. You cannot win with 120th in turnover margin. Again, I know we talked about this on the offensive side, but their defense didn't force very many turnovers either. They have to do better in turnover margin this season as a whole, and particularly in this game and any big games they want to win. They cannot be -9 on the year in turnover margin and expect to call it a good year. They also had no defensive touchdowns last year, whereas Utah had 3. Not something that really carries over into this year. I don't think it's something that you can use as a predictive thing, but still interesting to note. And then this one I think could be predictive. Penalties per game, Utah was very good. They were 15th. They're 4.8 penalties per game. That is indicative of a very well-coached machine that they have there. Kyle Whittingham has that thing going, and it fits their identity perfectly. Florida, and again, I know this was under Dan Mullen, which was kind of a clown act, but 8.08 penalties per game. So 8 penalties a game, 123rd in the country in penalties per game. The penalties and the turnover margin really, I think, show a severe lack of discipline, particularly the penalties, but just a sheer lack of discipline in the coaching staff. Now, Napier is not going to, he's obviously going to look to address that, and he has a much better reputation with those things than Mullen really did. But, again, how much of that is a cultural issue that is sort of ingrained into Florida, and how quickly can you get that out versus how much of that is a unique to Mullen issue? Definitely something to look at. If Florida is getting severely more penalties, I mean, almost double the penalties as Utah, could really swing a game that is going to be as close as I think this one will be. On the other side of that, though, net punting, Florida not great, 54th in the country at 40 yards a punt. Utah 111th in net punting. They do need to be able to do decent in the punting game. I know nobody wants to talk about punting, but it is field position, and it's vitally important. It goes hand in hand with that third down percentage. Even if you're not turning that into touchdowns, if you're turning that into field flips, that's really crucial, especially in close games like this that are going to kind of be line of scrimmage defensive type of games. Punting is going to actually be really vital here, so if Florida can win the punting game, it's not going to say it's going to win them the game, but it's definitely an edge that's nice to have. So the big takeaways from the defensive slide here, number one has to be Utah's passing defensive struggles. Their secondary is a problem. Will that rear its head here, and how improved will their secondary be? That's the big question for them there. Their rushing defense is actually pretty good, though. It's not amazing, but it is pretty good. And against a Florida team that really wants to run the ball, that is interesting to see because Utah is a very good rushing offense and a pretty good rushing defense. So this game hinging on the line of scrimmage, it's looking like a Utah lean at that point. Florida has some bad defensive issues, particularly in their run defense. Their run defense was abysmal. Their passing defense was not great, but it was solid. Their run defense was really bad, and if that carries over into this year, they're not going to win this game. It is what it is. If that carries over here, Utah will win this game, and they'll do it in very, very Utah fashion. The other big thing there is going to be the turnover margin plus the penalties. Those could really, really rear their head here. Be very interesting to see if Napier can fix both the turnovers and the penalties. I think he will. I just don't know how quickly that'll happen. And in a big game like this, those things are going to be, they're going to have a spotlight shined on them. So they may be even more, even more extreme than they would normally be, even more exaggerated than they would normally be throughout the course of the season. So that brings us to the key matchup slide. So these matchups are the most important things for that individual team. So the most important thing for Utah is the lines of scrimmage. If Utah loses the lines of scrimmage, then they're probably not going to win the game. But if they win the lines of scrimmage, which they should, honestly, the way that their team is built, they should win the line of scrimmage in this game. Then, depending on what degree they do that to, the game looks great for them. Even if they break even, the game looks good for them in the line of scrimmage. But if they win the line of scrimmage by a decent margin, it makes it really difficult for Florida to find a way to get a win here. With that, their second one is just their rushing offense against Florida's rushing defense. That's a huge one. If Utah's rushing offense is rolling, I don't see Florida being able to win the game. If they can't stop Utah's rushing attack, I don't think Florida's offense is going to be explosive enough to match up with that, especially with the limited time of possession and things like that. So Utah really needs to win the line of scrimmage and get the rushing offense going. Last one for Utah, get pressure on Anthony Richardson because he is so turnover prone, because he's really in his first true year as a starter, new staff, new scheme. You get some pressure on him, you make him uncomfortable, you might see him make a couple big mistakes, and that can really swing this game in Utah's favor. If Florida runs into turnovers, then they're going to have a real issue. On the Florida side of things, Anthony Richardson needs to be very good. He can't have turnovers. He needs to be able to throw the ball down the field every now and then, be efficient, have some explosives, also run the ball well, lead the offense, keep him on the field on third down, convert some big plays, make a couple red zone moves, things like that. Anthony Richardson really needs to play very well for Florida to do well in this game. Along with that, the rushing defense has to show up. If they don't show up this game, none of the rest of it matters because that rushing defense is the critical point in this game. If they don't show up, Florida's going to have a really long day. So they really need to be there. That's the huge matchup for Florida. Third one there, turnover battle. Again, we've touched on it already. They can't turn the ball over like they did last year. They're not going to be able to win this game or really any big games with that kind of a turnover. Brings us to the turning points. These are things that if they go the way of the team they're on that side of, then it's going to really swing the game in their direction. So turning point one for Utah, we've talked about it, lines of scrimmage. if they go their way, the game's going to swing heavy for Utah. Second one for them, forcing turnovers and getting sacks. So upsetting Anthony Richardson with sacks, getting pressure on him, that in turn can force some turnovers. If they do that and they do get some turnovers, get some sacks, and really limit Florida's passing offense and limit Anthony Richardson, then I don't see a path for Florida to win, to be honest. So another huge turning point for Utah. And the last one, just keeping their offense on track. Keep the run game going. Keep them in third and manageables. Grind the clock a little bit. Don't make mistakes. Don't take a lot of negative plays. And just methodically stay on track, move the ball down the field. That's what they want to do. And that's really what Utah consistently does, particularly in big games like this. If they can do that, looking very, very good for them. On the Florida side of this, skill position athleticism could swing here. Now, we've seen Utah struggle with some really, really good athletes in the past. Florida has those level of athletes. Now, that's not to say that just because they're athletic, Utah doesn't have a shot, because they absolutely do. But every now and then you see two teams, especially early in the season, come together, and one team is clearly the more athletic and more talented one, and that kind of shocks the other team, and it takes them a little while to adjust. And then by the time they do adjust, the game's out of hand. There's a chance that could happen here for Florida. I don't think it will, but if it does, it could really, really turn the game for them. Second one is the line of scrimmage. Not necessarily winning them, but breaking even. If Florida can break even on the line of scrimmage, they can hang in this game and be just fine. But if they're losing them, I don't see much of a shot. If Florida wins the line of scrimmage, though, then I don't see a good shot for Utah to win. So the line of scrimmage really is going to determine this game one way or the other. Last one for Florida, protect the football. They cannot have turnovers. If they have turnovers, everything kind of goes out the window. So huge turning point there for Florida. If they're protecting the football, things are looking a lot better for them. That takes me to my final score prediction. So you can see here I have it at Utah winning 27-24. A 3-point game, a very close game, probably the closest big marquee matchup of week one, in my opinion. It's a very difficult game to predict. You can see my confidence on a 1 to 10 is a 4, and that's a week 1 4 as well. All of the week 1 confidence should be curved down a little bit because we haven't seen these teams yet. I am very much not confident in who's going to win this game. Florida's home field advantage could swing this game by a touchdown or more on its own. And so that could completely win the game. If Florida has a lot of turnovers, though, Utah could win this game by 2 or 3 scores. If Florida plays clean and wins the line of scrimmage, then that could also swing it for them. If their athleticism is too much for Utah, that could swing it there. There's a lot of things that are unknown in this game that could be huge swings. Vegas has this at, I think, Utah -3 right now, which is right where I have it. They've got the over-under right around where I have it as well. I'm very much in line with them here. I think it opened at Utah -1.5 and has kind of crept up a little bit. I don't know about that. It's going to be a really tight game. If Florida could get this win, though, it would be massive for Napier and that staff, and really, really crucial to getting that ball rolling for them. It would be a trademark win for him early on. And really, even if he loses it, as long as they lose really close, I think it's a good show that they're stepping in the right direction. It's not a bad thing. On the Utah side of things, a loss here would be pretty detrimental. Now, I'm not going to punish them too much for it because it's a road trip to Florida week 1 that they don't have to make, and we really, I think, should give them props for even agreeing to do a game like this. We don't have enough teams doing that kind of stuff, but especially if they lose by 2 scores or something, it's not as much detrimental to Utah, I think, as it is to the Pac-12's perception as a whole, because if they're arguably, really undoubtedly best team in the conference, goes and plays a pretty mid-level SEC team and loses substantially, it looks rough for the conference as a whole. I don't think it'll happen. I've got Utah winning by 3, but it's a very, very close game. Anyway, that's going to do it for this one. Let me know down below in the comment section where you guys agree and or disagree with me on this prediction, as well as who you have winning and what the score will be. I'm always super interested to see you guys' feedback, particularly on these prediction type of videos. Also, be sure to like the video and subscribe for more college football content in the future. I think this will be my last prediction for this week, but I'll have more coming in next week, so be on the lookout for that. Check out some of the other videos if you haven't. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.